It's not because the strategy was wrong. It's just that mindset I had. If you're true to yourself, the place that you need to be honest, banks don't really want to own anything.
Welcome back, investor, to another episode of the Passive Income Adventures. Today we've got Amish Munshi with us, calling in from California.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Thanks for having me on this podcast.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation because you and I do something somewhat similar. So I think it'll be interesting for us to be able to have the conversation for the listeners to hear us compare notes a little bit on our business models, where they are similar, where they're different. You also brought up some really interesting topics when we were talking before we started recording about California real estate. I think it's like most people think it's a total conundrum. It's an untouchable, but what you've learned from those lessons, how you can apply that to your business. Also, I thought your approach to taxes and tax planning was very unusual that I have not heard before, which is funny because I don't think it's going to be what they're expecting. And just basically planning out your business so that you can have growth and cash flow, which since we retired from our corporate jobs has been a really important distinction for us to make. You made the comment earlier, so you can't eat equity. And I say that all the time. It's like we invest for growth, but I can't take equity to the grocery store, pay my light bill with it. So how do we solve that cash flow issue that plagues so many passive investors? So I'm looking forward to the conversation. And how about you kick us off with a little bit about your own background, how you got into this, catch us up from maybe some early experiences you had, some pivot moments where you're just rethinking life and because we're a non-traditional path,
Oh,
right? Yeah. So share that with us and catch us up to where you are in the present day.
yeah, thanks. And it's been great and joining the podcast and getting to learn a little more about you as well. We have been working together at or using a very similar platform, and we love the tools and resources that the platform provide already. This is Amish Munshi. I have been doing real estate investments. I think most of us have been doing it for most of our life. Like, we would have been related or affiliated with living in some place or investing into something for most of our life. Our parents may have bought something. So most of us are somewhat familiar with real estate,
Yeah.
but it probably the same with me. But the big difference is about 5 years ago, I decided to call it a full-time work for me, right? The main reason was I had worked in technology field for about 20 years. And it was getting to a stage where I was looking to make a change within the technology space. And then I took a step back and reevaluated saying, what am I doing? I wanted to be in an industry where it's a little more personal, didn't want to be in kind of automobile industries, although that's my passion. I love cars and automobiles and motorcycles. I didn't want to be in a place where it feels very corporate. So that's how I selected real estate as a field to be in and work full time. When I took that decision, I spent a lot of time learning what can be achieved in real estate. I realized the investment aspects of real estate way more lucrative than anything else. So finally, I was doing this to make some money, to have some passive income in my life. And I started flipping single family homes, made some good money over there. Then I realized it's actually pretty easy to grow wealth with this, but then how do we scale this up? How do I reuse the skills that I've developed in doing construction, doing remodeling, figuring out the markets? How do I take that and scale it up to the next level? That's when I started focusing on financing, what is possible to do with the money and where the money moves. Like understanding where the money moves is way more important. That helped me decide where I put my own money. So that's what got me interested in the debt aspects of real estate. And I was doing a project in two different markets. I was able to get financing for one market very easily versus the other one. Nobody wanted to fund it. But the numbers looked very similar, but they just didn't want to fund it. That second market struggled 3 years later. When we look back and see that second market struggled a lot, like it's just not a place where it would have worked out. That's the other thing that got me interested in money aspects of real estate rather than the physical aspect of the asset.
Yeah. It's similar in some ways, but also different to what we've been doing. So tell me a little bit about that market comparison, because I know when I very first started and I was looking at properties, you'd see numbers that were working really well. And I'll just give you a quick. Sure. Well,
Yeah.
when I figured out what a cap rate meant, I know a real estate metric, I know cap rate. And so I would look at things, I'm like, I won't buy anything that's not a 10 cap or
Mhm.
whatever. And it turned out that I was finding a lot of 10 and 12 cap properties in small cities. And I'm like, why would I buy a 6 cap downtown when I could buy a 10 cap out? And I've realized why they're 10 caps. Basically, they're really difficult to manage. It's hard to find renters. It's hard to find contractors, labor,
Yeah.
management, maintenance. All that is more difficult. What was being sold as a 10 cap, usually mom and pop didn't know how to give me their own numbers. And when I started learned more about just what's a cap rate, I was like, oh man, they have 5 expenses and there should be like 55. And so just recognizing that their 10 cap was actually like a 4
Yeah.
because what they said they could deliver. So tell me about those 2 markets, what you learned from experience that I had and your shift more into the financing side of things.
Yeah. And I can give you the exact names of the markets. They were
Fine.
all within the California Bay Area. One was San Francisco, one was San Jose.
Okay.
So now when we look back, this is like 2018, 2019, both the markets were extremely hot. Things were selling like crazy in both the markets. And San Francisco, we know where it is right now versus San Jose, where it is right now. And that's what got me interested in saying, if I have to deploy my own money or my investors' money, I better know where the money is moving. I still haven't figured out, or I still don't have an answer whether the lack of capital caused the issue or the issue caused the lack of capital. I haven't figured out the chicken or the egg situation still,
No.
but in reality, like whatever happened for the good.
Yeah. I find that there's just a lot of uncertainty with lenders to do anything that's outside of their norm. And that's one thing that I've learned. The larger projects we've done, the more institutional our business becomes and the more institutional lenders and investors that we're working with, the more I've recognized like the rinse and repeat, boring cookie cutter kind of stuff is really their bread and butter. And they do not like to step outside of that box. Have you found similar?
Yeah, and I think it's there for a reason. Coming from a tech background, I always like to do something innovative. That's just in me, right? That's my nature.
Yeah.
And what I've realized within the financing and the lending business is the same thing. Something that smaller investor, a smaller lender is willing to take a risk on something. After doing that like 3 or 4 times, we figure out what works and what doesn't work. That's when an institutional investor steps in and is like willing to take a lower return, but likes the repetition of that. So just as an example, if a smaller hard money lender might be willing to do a loan at 12% and be willing to modify their guidelines so that they are able to lend on an asset. But an institutional investor might be like, no, we are not doing this.
Yep.
But then an institutional investor will come up and say, hey, there is a track record of doing this for the last 4 or 5 years. We are okay with a 9% return, but we want to ensure that it actually does work. So that's how innovation comes up. The rinse and repeat is great to optimize, but the innovation comes in when somebody is willing to take that initial risk.
Yeah. Especially coming from that Silicon Valley tech background and where innovation is praised. And we're looking at life, we go into real estate with this venture capital model. Oh, well, the next greatest thing, we're going to capitalize on this trend, or we're going to put prop tech into it, or all of these things. And we're not recognizing that real estate is not venture cap. Real estate thrives on boring. And what this really
Right.
got driven home to me was I was at an angel investor club because I was just trying to meet wealthy people who might want to invest in my deals. And I was just asking around there, what do you do? What do you do? And I was like, oh, I buy large multifamily real estate deals and we lend hard money to flippers, basically. And they're like, most of the times you tell people you're a real estate investor and they perk up and they're like, whoa, they don't want to talk about anything else. But in this room of wealthy angel investors, they would deflate when they heard about what I did. And I finally figured it out when somebody finally told me, we're here to basically find the next greatest thing. How
Yeah.
do you think we made so much money in the first place? It was from real estate. We have real estate deals coming out of our ears. We don't want to look at more real estate deals. It's our base level boring. And then we have some fun money where we can go off and invest in something that probably won't make it. But if we spread it across enough deals, we can get a big win. And I personally am still in the boring real estate portion of this. So from a tech perspective, where you're supposed to be building in redundancies to your systems versus that innovation, like how do you reconcile? Because you mentioned reusing skills that you learned in tech to translate into this new business, but you're coming at it from this innovation, but you're also, especially if you're in any kind of a SaaS or software development or delivering this product that's ready for consumers, there are a lot of redundancies built into that to make it reliable and porous. How do you reconcile those two things, combine those skills and take them into your new business?
Very important question. And I think that's where the difference comes in from experience, knowledge, and education.
Mhm.
Something that has been doing something like, what's the difference between And this happens in all professions, right? It could be a doctor and a nurse. It could be an engineer and a mechanic. It could be an architect and a general contractor. What's the difference? An architect, a doctor, and an attorney versus like rocket lawyer or something like that. So there's always two levels, like somebody that has spent a lot of time getting educated, getting the experience before doing something in the real world. That education gives them the knowledge and the understanding of what's happening behind the scenes. And when some innovation is required, a mechanic might be able to do some innovation to make a carburetor work in a car so that it just continues running. But an engineer might go back and redesign the whole thing and develop a new car, right? That's confidence. So it needs a lot of education, understanding of why things work the way they work. Like on the lending business, knowing the basics of lending. Why is there guidelines on lending? Why do we have 90% financing? Why doesn't the lender just give 100% of the money to buy a house? Why do they need that? I don't think they have enough money. They could just give the 100%. But why do they want the borrower to come up with that 10% down payment, right? That understanding and knowledge comes from experience, education, skill. And somebody that has that can create innovation that will actually work.
That inductive, deductive logic circle that you're talking about, so you can look at a specific situation of you in your previous career. You're able to generalize that knowledge, and then you're able to move over to a new thing and then re-specify that knowledge. That skill is unusual, but for people who are good at doing it, they don't sometimes recognize how unusual, how exceptional it is to be able to go through that loop. So
Yeah.
is that something you have thought about, or is that something you just have naturally done?
I think I've thought about it a little bit, but it's also come a little bit through experience, right? Like I was like, why did I go through engineering and MBA and all of this? And what I learned in the college, I don't use any of that in the real world. Like, why are we making somebody go through 5, 7, 10 years of education? And then in reality, somebody that did a 3-week course could be developing the same software that I am developing over here. The difference comes down to innovation, saying, hey, somebody that has done a 2-week course of figuring out how to do data science is not going to be able to innovate in the correct way compared to somebody that has an engineering background with the understanding of why things work the way they work.
Yes. So it may not be directly applicable. My daughter's in her senior year of mechanical engineering right now. And I'm going to butcher this because I'm not an engineer, but she's doing heat transfer right now, which is apparently the hardest class in this program. She's like, I don't know why I need to learn any of this. I'm never going to be a
Yeah.
steam turbine engineer. And she's just so useless. And everybody she's talking to, like, I don't use any of the stuff that I learned in school. But you bring up a very good point. Having those experiences broadens our ability to go through that logic and be able to say, I've been exposed to all of these things that are very specific, but then how do I take that and apply it to something new?
Yeah.
Sounds like what you did, making the shift from tech to real estate.
Yeah. And I think when we switch that, I think give yourself enough time to understand what, like another aspect that I realized over time is the investment is more about our own personality, right? There's a risk profile. I started doing some stock trading and options trading for a few years in the middle. I did really good when I had a smaller portfolio. When I started trading larger amounts, the exact same strategies didn't work. And it's not because the strategy was wrong. It's just that the mindset I had was limited and that strategy would have worked with a smaller portfolio. The same thing wouldn't work with a larger portfolio. The same thing goes with real estate investments. There is no wrong investment. Buy and hold is a great investment. Fix and flipping is a great investment. Larger investments within syndications is great. Everything can work. It depends on the psychology of the investor. Are they open to figuring out and working through what is involved in that investment and getting the returns when it's the right time to actually materialize and get returns? The correct question to ask is, what do you want out of an investment? That will help you succeed in your investment, because a lot of people invest in various different things and many times they don't succeed. But more than likely, it's just because they got pulled into the marketing or the idea and the concept rather than realizing what they need.
Okay, so you bring up some really good points there about how to go through the process to figure out where you're going to fit. So you start out in engineering tech, and then you're going to go into the market, you're going to do some trading, then you want to scale that and realize that it's not directly transferable. You're going to have to make some tweaks, and then you're going into real estate, and now you're more into real estate finance. And so a lot of people get criticized when we start that we're looking at shiny objects and chasing squirrels. And we're like, oh, have you heard about farms? Have you heard about apartments? Have you heard about data centers? And it looks like we're all over the place. So how do you go through that process where you're trying things, fully understanding if this is going to work for you or not without just jumping from thing to thing?
I think the question is going to be, that's where a good financial advisor comes in. Than listening to one specific thing. Somebody, it could be the person themselves working with themselves and identifying what they really need, right? About 7 years ago, I worked with a financial advisor and they gave me a specific number saying, hey, this is what I need for retiring in terms of the wealth that I need. And I was like, holy crap, if I could keep working, I was earning a lot of money, like really good amount of money. My wife was a physician. I was earning pretty good, but I was not going to reach the goal that I need for my retirement money. And partly because of the problem that ends up happening is the high income indirectly converts into a higher requirement of net worth for retiring. So even loop.
It's because you want to maintain the lifestyle. Yeah.
Exactly. When it get more and more expensive. Just going back, the question to be asked is to yourself, saying, what do you need? And the need also changes over time. When I came up with a need, say, just to put a random number out there, let's say I need $10 million to retire. I did actually manage to reach that number within 3 or 4 years of investing in real estate. But then I was like, okay, now what do I need? The need itself changes over time. Then I wanted more freedom. I was like, okay, I have the $10 million, but I'm working full time to just keep this thing alive. So then I wanted more time. So the need itself changes, and plotting, just having a strategy of what you need and ensuring that you are true to, it's like marriage, right? If you're true to yourself, the marriage will work. It's not really about the other partner.
Yes,
If you're true to yourself, it's going to work well. It's the same with investments.
yeah. Okay. And that sounds like me asking myself the question when I first lost my business when we moved. I was on location photographer doing some remote graphic design, things like that, but it just wasn't making enough money. And so I was like, should I scale up this graphic design business? Should I start a new photography business in this new area? I took a step back and I said, look, and I didn't use this word, this is a real estate word, but what's my highest and best use of my time with my skill set? Should I go to medical school? Should I go to engineering school? These are things I was having in my mind at age 40. What you said about the needs changing, that's exactly what happened. My needs changed because we were in a new situation. And I had to just ask myself, again, highest and best use. My current skill set at the time, the best thing was real estate investing. But then you get into it and realize, oh my, there's so many ways to make money. And so then say, okay, why? Getting really deep on your why. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
I knew I wanted a job for about 5 years because I thought I probably retire my husband in about 5 years, which means I need to keep myself busy for 5 years. And then after that, we both need to be able to retire. We retired very early, way before we could maintain our current lifestyle at the time. And we just cut back like crazy. And what that's done is it's helped us to say, okay, I know I can survive here. And like you said, now what do I want? And we can just keep growing that and growing that, understanding that we didn't have to keep going until we could cut off the lifestyle. We chose a path of cutting back. And most people, when they hear that, are like, doing that. But just being able to make those personal decisions about how this is going to look. Yeah, that's interesting. And I hope the listener will think through their own process, their own why, their own highest and best use, their own need. What do I need now? And how might those needs change in the future? Because you're in the situation now where you're providing passive income for your investors through your fund. And you're probably thinking to yourself already into the future, like, how am I going to take care of this passive income for myself so that I'm not always working full time, like you mentioned?
Yeah. And I think at a bare minimum in a person's life, they go through 3 phases. First is their own basic needs. Then once that is satisfied, that's when they will start thinking about, okay, how do I care about my family, or what do I do? That's like when you're at the prime of your health through the middle ages. That's when you start thinking and saying, okay, what can I do? That's when you're like, okay, that's when the stress builds up, right? That's when you're like, oh crap, I'm not going to be able to do something when I'm 60, when I'm 70, when I'm 80. I need to have some financial assets in place. That's when people start investing and say, hey, I need net worth. So that I call that as the first stage in financial life, saying you need some amount of savings, some amount of net worth. And then you'll be like, okay, now this is taking too much time. Then you go to the next phase where you start saying, okay, how can I just automate all of this so that I get the money and I don't have to work for the money, make my money work for me. And then you'll reach the third stage where all of this is good. You have freedom, you have passive income, and you reach the third stage where it's like, what can I, like, you start developing a need for doing something more. How do I contribute back and leave a legacy? That's like a third stage. If I have to break it down, I think most people will go through three phases. I'm sure there is like a fourth or a fifth stage. I'm not there yet. I don't know. But these are the three stages that I think a person should be pretty happy with their life if they manage to go through these three phases.
Yeah, great point. My 16-year-old was looking me up on LinkedIn the other day, and I get this text, random text. She goes, "Mom, are you a multimillionaire?" I was like, "Girl, how does she know that word? And why is she asking this?" I said, "Technically, yes, but it means that we own several $1,000,000 worth of assets." That's like saying I would have money if I sold some stuff. I said, "We don't make that per year, and we certainly don't have that cash in the bank." And she goes, "Oh, I was wondering why you said on LinkedIn that you're a multimillionaire and what that means."
Yeah.
Because I feel like a multimillionaire. I'm like, "Babe, neither do I." I thought I would have a private jet by now, but
Yeah.
apparently being a multimillionaire doesn't mean much anymore. But
Yeah.
that phase of going through that, exactly, we're talking about the three phases. We're probably somewhere at phase 2.5 because we
Mhm.
really are thinking about how to contribute, how to leave a legacy for our young adult children. But at the same time, I really struggle. Like, why am I working so hard at this business to help people that don't want to be helped?
Yeah.
I can't. Raising money right now is it's rough, right? And we're doing it because our family has been so fundamentally changed through this journey that now I have this desire to go out and help other people. But when it's so difficult to raise capital and so difficult to carry off the mission, I'm like, why am I doing this again? So I don't know. Tell me where you are there, what stage you're at there yourself.
I think I'm at a stage where I'm probably at a very similar 2.5 stage where I'm like, okay, I'm able to do all of this, but why am I doing this? And then we start thinking about, I've gone backwards a little bit on there saying, I started doing this. I figured out how I can do this for myself. And now I'm like, how I can do this for others. I have a lot of my other friends and colleagues, everyone in my sphere of influence and circle saying, I'm still working in the tech job. I sometimes like working on things that I'm doing, but this is not exactly what I was 5 years ago. This is what I wanted to do, but I think I want to do something different now.
Yeah.
I want a little more time. I want just the basic things needing that they want to change. And I'm like, okay, I think I can help you. I can help you guide and go in the same direction that I went. But the place that you need to be honest to yourself is this what you want to do for 5 years from now? Let's be true to ourselves. And that's where I am right now, just helping other people reach the right goal. And if passive income through real estate investments is something that they want to do, then I can work with them within as we can have a business relationship.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can be friends.
Yeah. Like, oh, that's a new question I hadn't thought of before we started talking is like keeping the personal and the business. Okay. Put a pin in that one. Let's come back to it. Tell me what we were talking about at the beginning, like what you've learned investing in California and how you've been able to then take that, again, that logic loop
Yeah.
to put that onto other markets and how it's helped you be successful. Because most people look at California real estate and they're like, I'm not touching that. So I'm kind of in that boat. I realized recently, if you build something and sell it, like that's actually can be pretty
Yeah.
good there. I just don't want to hold stuff long term. So tell me about what you've learned there.
Sure. And I think what I am, again, it goes back to what I used to do about 20 years ago when I was doing a project with AIG. We were implementing a piece of technology and it was nationwide. AIG had owned a company called America Retirement in Woodland Hills in Southern California. The way the technology was being implemented, all the other subdivisions within AIG were waiting for corporate to tell them what to do. Versus the Sun America specific department was driving things and doing something new based on that experience. Other sub agencies were doing something similar. I was very new at that time. I was new to California. They just kept saying, why does it take so much more money to do anything in California? It's just that mindset, right? Saying we are willing to do something new. Obviously, there is a lot of overhead when we try to do something first time. Most of the times it may not even work. And that's the same thing that I observed when I was working on other projects. The things that we did in technology implementations over here in California, after 5 or 7 years, the same things were being implemented in the rest of the country. Even within real estate, I'm seeing the same thing. California has been a cash flow negative market forever, right? And I'm seeing that similar trend in the rest of the country. It's more and more difficult to get cash flow. And when I look back, I don't think McDonald's makes a lot of money in US. They probably just survive, but they make their money outside of US. So the within my businesses, obviously, I don't think McDonald's will succeed if it's not in US. If it's only in the other countries, I don't think it will survive. But just the competitive nature that US provides, the competitive nature that California provides, what happens over here, if you're able to sustain that, you will be able to sustain in other markets and be very profitable. Being in a very competitive, open market will help you develop strategies. And the strategy that I see right now working within real estate is holding something long term is really difficult. And that's what's probably going to happen in the rest of the world later. So, what I see is in the worst case, the cost of construction is like $300, $400 a square feet. But real estate is selling closer to $1,000 a square feet over here. So, we can build a lot of money. We can increase our net worth by doing something value add. But then holding it long term is very painful, right? That's where I would give it away to some institutional investor or somebody else. Or in my case, I like to invest in single family home. So let it be somebody's home. I don't want to own it as a rental.
Yeah.
There is more demand for people wanting to buy their house. Let's just go with that market force. Let somebody own it.
Yeah.
I,
But we're talking about like the corporate roll up of these single family properties and with Vance and Harris getting together for this anti-corporate housing. It's not a popular philosophy to say, I'm going to go and resell it because I don't want this burden hanging over me long term. And granted,
Mhm.
you a couple of rentals, they do start seeming like burdens, like you were talking about before. It's like asking yourself the question, how can I increase my net worth and increase my cash flow while getting more time back?
Yeah.
And holding a bunch of rentals and basically running a property management company is not it. So you were talking about investing for appreciation versus investing for cash flow or transactions, and
Mhm.
how the way that California goes is a harbinger of the way that the rest of the country is going to go. And I definitely have seen that being in Salt Lake City and then before that in Austin and now investing back in Austin. It's feeling more and more pinched. Those are not cash flow markets, but even when we're looking at cash flow markets like Louisville,
Yep.
Indiana, and so the Cincinnati, Louisville triangle there with Indianapolis. And I feel like where's the cash flow? So this has been a difficult thing for me to get my head wrapped around because the wealth in real estate is through appreciation, but you need cash flow to pay your bills. So
Yeah.
walk me through your personal philosophy of investing for appreciation versus investing for lifestyle, like whether that's just basics or
Yeah.
fun money.
Absolutely. And I think the way I have structured my business, and obviously it will vary based on markets and scenarios. So the way I've structured my business, and that's what I recommend for anybody trying to invest in my region,
Mhm.
is do the value add and then sell the asset. You've finished contributing to the asset. You've done the value add. You may increase the value of the asset, and then let just sell it, let it go, and then the money and the that you have to get the lifestyle that you really want, lend that money. Look at what banks do, right? Banks don't really want to own anything.
They don't want REO. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. So just lend the money. A 3% return on debt is equivalent to a 10% return on equity.
Y-
And I have a webinar for it in case if somebody wants to go and actually understand what that even means. Like how can a 3% return be equivalent to a 10% return? But a
mm,
3% compounding return over 5 years will defeat a 10% equity return. But the beauty of a debt investment is if I'm doing the debt investment, I'm the lender. I'm the last person to wire the money into escrow. I come up with all the rules I want to do, and I just keep denying loans, not intentionally, just because it needs to meet my guidelines. And then when the property sells, I'm the first person that gets paid.
mhm.
And doesn't matter what happens to the property, what is going on, I'm getting a paycheck every single month for majority of my investment.
Yeah. Oh, and that thing is like the risk that you take as a first lien note holder is so much less
Yeah,
than and we have a little graphic of the capital stack. I don't know if I've ever even really talked about it before. If you're at the bottom of that capital stack, senior debt, like you get
yeah,
paid first and you're in the least risky position. The most risky is the owner operator because
yeah.
they get paid last because they're getting paid out of profits that they first have to share with their investors and pay their loans off. And then whatever's left over at the end,
Mhm.
hopefully we can collect. So it's a much riskier place to be. And I think a lot of people don't see it from that. They're like, oh, I want to be a GP, a general partner. I want to own my own building so I'll make more money. And I'm like, oh, like I make less money in total returns as a lender, but we are building our wealth faster because
Yeah.
we're getting, frankly, we're just getting screwed less often.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what happened in 2020, 2021 with that extremely high appreciation, that's what is getting a lot of people interested in investing in real estate. But
Mhm.
that's not the reality. That's not the norm. Growth is like at best 5% if everything goes perfect. If that's the reality, let's reanalyze like what's the best way to invest. And I would rather have consistent cash flow. And there are other ways, and still there is ways to increase the net worth, right? There is equity investments which you should do. A portfolio should be balanced. There should be some stock investments and equity investments in stock markets and other assets that you should also own. But within real estate, I think this is something that I see working. I think the same model will work really well across USA going forward. And only cash flow is also not good, right? So if you're somewhere in Midwest and North, yeah, you'll get great cash flow, but then after doing all the work, is the property appreciating enough so that you can do something when you sell it, you're going to get anything?
Yeah, definitely. Appreciation, like I said, we have built wealth through appreciation, but we definitely changed our strategy. And I don't think it's because the market has changed. I think it's because we know more now.
Yeah.
We changed our strategy a little bit. And I'm grateful for the properties that we held and the money that we receive from that through appreciation. But like you said, banks aren't holding on to that. And does the money control the deal or does the deal control the money? And it's always the money controlling the deal, whether it's the
Yeah.
lender or the investor. And when we got on the right side of that, I really started to see our time freedom change, our philosophy change. It's like when I was a photographer, I was a real estate photographer. And I would be taking pictures of these houses, and sometimes they were rental homes and the owner would be there and I'd be asking him about his real estate business. I thought it was fascinating. And one day I was like, I'm on the wrong side of this camera.
Yeah.
Like I'm a service provider, a vendor for this person who owns something. And so that's when I really realized like owning something is better. And so you continue to have those realizations as you get through. So as we're talking about, I sometimes I just have to unpack what people say because it's that was really good. So I appreciate you sharing that and letting me work through it. But I am thinking to myself, taxes, right? Like we hold enough equity to get the depreciation that we need to look broke on our taxes. And as we have more and more losses carrying forward from this depreciation, we're real estate investors, so
Mhm.
we get unlimited amounts and we can carry it forward indefinitely. We're seeing our equity is less and less valuable because we have enough, just enough to make it look like we're making no money and offset any active income we get from interest. And so we're reducing the amount of equity we have for that reason. But you have a different view on taxes. Like you're making money off selling it, like you're getting hit with capital gains, especially if you sell it holding it for short term capital gains. How are you handling your tax situation?
So the way I've always been an overly optimistic person in my life. So everyone around me always blames me for it. And I think I will be more rich in the future than now. If I have to pay a 15% tax on 100 times my wealth in the future, that's
Mhm.
going to be more than paying a 30% tax on 100th of that asset right now.
Okay.
So I would much rather be paying my taxes right now, get rid of it, investing through some retirement accounts or through some life insurances.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest taxes is after gaining, like reaching that third stage of maturity, right, of financial life. What do you do? Okay, let's say you have $100 million and you have your kids. How do you transfer that $100 million to the kids?
Life insurance and charitable trust gets everything else. At least that's
Yeah,
our plan.
exactly. Right. So invest through there. Otherwise, you're paying such a big tax later.
Mhm.
It's just absurd. Like I would much rather pay my 30% on $1 million right now.
Yeah. That's a good point if you believe that you're gonna make more in the future. And that's if you're looking at retirement accounts, you mentioned that. Whether you do a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA makes zero difference. It's if the tax rate remains unchanged. You're either gonna
Yeah.
pay your 30% now on the money before it goes in, or you're gonna pay your 30% on all the money that comes out. And it ends up being no difference if the tax rate doesn't change. And so your optimism that you're talking about I think people who are more optimistic tend to be better risk takers. Just,
Yeah.
The negative ones are the ones who can't really make any decisions. So you can be too far on one end of that scale or the other. So I triangulate cautious optimism seems
Mm.
like where you are.
Yeah.
But to be able to say, I'm going to make more money in the future, how do you think about offsetting those taxes in the future when you are making more money?
At the moment, most of my investments is through my Roth accounts,
Mm.
at least the ones that are passive. And then like majority, and what I did is I analyzed saying, how much do I need? Let's say when I turn 60, right? If that's when I want to not do anything in my life and I want to do what I really want to do, so something completely different. How much money do I really need at that time? That amount of money is what I should be able to withdraw from a retirement account every
Mhm.
single month. And the remaining amount of money should just go into my life insurance policies that gets transferred to wherever I want to send it.
Yeah. I wouldn't say we're into life insurance policies. It's something that I talked on this podcast before that every time I stop looking at them, I forget why we're doing that. And to look back and remind myself, like, oh, I don't think we're using the policy correctly. It was designed to be used. So just give me your quick rundown because I know a lot of financial planners hate the cash value life insurance or the overfunded life insurance policy. I'm like average, maybe. Where do you fall on the spectrum of how big a fan you are?
So it's a great, I just hope it doesn't change because everything does change. But fortunately, over decades and centuries, the fundamentals of that investment changed. And I observe that it's the same structure that other countries also implement. There are some core benefits to the way things work and why life insurances are structured the way they are structured. So I'm hoping that skeleton of financial structure in the world doesn't change. Life insurances will still be able to transfer assets to the next generation without major tax implications. There may be some tax implications, but no major. Just what I like to do is have a goal, have a vision of what you need, build in some contingency saying, what if the investment doesn't work out and you still need money for your living,
Yep.
so that much in retirement accounts. And then the remaining, I'm pretty much pro life insurance policy of transferring.
Yeah, I think what people are overlooking with the life insurance policy, because I had somebody call me recently, he said, you're a fan of these life insurance policies, but the only person I can find who's a fan of them is selling them. So can I just talk to you for a few minutes and get your unbiased opinion as far as because I don't have anything to sell. And one thing that he said he'd never thought about before was exactly that, was transferring that wealth to the next generation. I didn't think the death benefit was important in this policy. I thought it was to augment your own investing and it was supposed to be used during your lifetime, taking loans and all of that. And I told him, I said, my husband's term policy was like $500,000. So we had one at work and then one on our own and it expired. I think we went it to 55 or something. But his policy now is, I don't know, almost $2 million death benefit that expires when he's 110 or something like that.
That's way more valuable.
It's not even a comparison. One of my close family members' husband passed away and didn't have a life insurance because kids were all out of high school and they were out of college. And so it was like, well, we don't need this policy anymore. And watching that really solidified to me, like the 110 policy, like so the kids can inherit something. Like that all of a sudden became a much bigger deal to me and made me a bigger fan. So I'm actually more of a fan of the death benefit now.
Yeah,
No.
and more, I hope your husband lives more than 102, but the bigger benefit that I see is being able to transfer that wealth to a beneficiary, right? Like that's way more important.
Yes. Yeah. It's huge. And taking loans out and all that's like a fringe benefit. But having that sense of security, because like you said, when you get to stage 2.5 and 3 and you're thinking about
Yeah.
how do I leave a legacy, not just for my kids, but for my community as well, it does start coming into focus a lot more. And I realize now I didn't care about a legacy when I was at stage 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Oh, whatever. Like my kids are
Yeah.
gonna, I was 0, right? Like I work, the kids can work. But
Yeah.
I've changed my mind on that over the last couple of years for sure.
Yeah. And I don't think I'll still raise my kids and give the money is fine. Yeah, they'll get some money. And I probably grew up in relatively well doing family when I was young. Unfortunately, my dad passed away a little early, but most of those assets we ended up using for my education, for my lifestyle. We still continue to have a good lifestyle. Irrespective, let's say we leave $100 million for our kids in 2070, the 100 million is not going to mean much.
Yeah, they're not gonna have their private jet then either.
They'll probably want a spaceship to go to Mars, right? 100 million is probably not going to be anything.
Yeah, well, Tesla's recovering its boosters now, so we're all gonna be in space soon. So I
Yeah.
was joking, my husband used to work in semiconductor manufacturing, and they're talking about like semiconductors in space for the no gravity. And when he used to be a tech, I'm like, can you imagine if you like were commuting to space in the mornings? or stay up there for a week. Like, world is changing pretty fast. And I think that's
Yeah.
part of what you're saying. It's, I don't know what's coming, and the security of being able to provide not just for us now, but also later has become a bigger and bigger deal. The more I have the capacity to even think about that. So
Yeah.
walk through your process as you're coming into your eventual retirement years, because nobody wants, like you said, your buddies, nobody wants to work till they're 65, even if they
Mhm.
like doing. So we tend, most people I talk to tend to want to retire somewhere 50 to 55 is their
Mhm.
target age. So what are your plans look like between, say, 50 and 65 for semi-retirement, or I'm now financially free, financially secure, so I can be work optional? What work would you do? And then after you get to 65, do you ever see yourself as like fully retiring? Tell us what that looks like for you.
Yeah. I don't think I'll ever fully retire. I'll always keep doing something. The amount of time I spend sitting in a chair doing something in front of a computer that's more structured, that might reduce. But I've not really thought as much of what I would like to do that far out. I know we'll have where the kids would be in college or whatever is going on. There will be phases of life that will be happening. But in parallel, I think I'll find a couple of missions that I'm somewhat spiritual as well. So I think I'll find something that's a little more on the spiritual side that will help improve the community. And although it's spiritual, I always think the spirituality helps us go inwards as well. Like it
Yeah.
just helps us build our own internal growth. I'm at a stage where I don't think God exists. The God is right there inside me. Whatever we try to do with the spirituality is only helping me.
Mhm.
Just make the world a better place by doing it that way. But in that's just because it helped me become a better person.
Yes. With all that dual benefit,
Yeah.
you can't really tease out the selfishness of wanting to do something that's good for yourself from the altruism of wanting to do something that's good for the community. They just are, they're just tied, and you can't separate it. So I think that's a beautiful sentiment, and something that I think I've heard somebody on the show say before: improving the world by becoming more in touch with the spiritual side of,
Mhm.
it's a very financial, practical goes you
Yeah.
the way that most of us think, like privately. We're not talking about
Yeah.
spirituality, finance show, but like you talked about, it enhances us. It's a reflection of the physical,
Yeah.
and that it causes that introspection that makes us better in both realms. You can't separate that either. So thank you for sharing that.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Tell us where people can find you. I always tell the guests, if you do have a podcast, this is the best place to promote it, because you are promoting it to a bunch of podcast listeners.
Yeah. Definitely reach out to me on my website, munshi.biz. There's my phone number right on the website. I have my email, amish@munshi.biz, if you prefer that rather than the website. I have a podcast called Main Street Minds, where I like promoting other small to mid-sized businesses that are local, that are doing something within the community to help improve the community. So it's not only real estate related. Real estate is one thing, but anything related to small business that people are working to improve their community in their neighborhoods. I have a variety of topics on my podcast.
Yeah. And you mentioned before, when you were talking about trying to unify your brand under a single umbrella, because you have multiple product streams, because we're using an investor platform as well, which means we can diversify with large multifamily equity and hard money loans in the residential space. How are you able to unify those brands under a single mission?
So I think for me, it was even more weird because the audience itself is completely diverse, right? I'm just the middleman. I have investors who invest with me and I have borrowers that borrow from me. Two complete different audiences are somebody that wants to give me money and then somebody that wants to borrow money from me.
Mhm.
Like investor is great because I can have different asset classes that I can allocate investments in. And then depending on the investor's needs, they can split between equity or debt investments. The end goal that I have personally is to help people reach that second stage financial life where they can actually have passive income and then they have the real financial freedom.
Yes. Oh, so I just want to package that up. It's like debt investing, or private lending, really is, frankly, it's better than equity. And so many of our investors are still looking at those higher returns from equity and being like, I don't want any debt. I don't want any debt. I just want to give them a little taste of it and say, we just need to diversify a little bit, put a little bit
Yeah.
into this debt side. And then eventually, I guarantee, as we age and our priorities change, we end up over in that box, which is why I structured the fund the way that I do. And it sounds like you're similar. And you just answered the last question I always ask: who should reach out to you? What type of person would benefit most
Yeah.
from talking to you after the show? And You basically just
Yeah.
described it there.
Somebody that's already has tried different investment options, but some have worked, some have not worked, and they want a little more reliability, a little more consistency in their investments.
Yes, and our best investors in our fund are people who dabbled around in the hard money lending or private lending a little bit. And then eventually, as they are getting a little closer to retirement, age 45, 50, somewhere around there, they'll say, I have $1 million, just take it. And they'll have
Yeah.
$1 million somewhere else in some equity, but they allocate a large portion for that because they're
Yeah.
really thinking about cash flow,
Yeah.
stability, risk management. I see that as a pattern, almost graduating to debt. I love how you phrase that. I've never really thought about it quite that way before.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, you and I came up with, I've thought about this, but this podcast and this conversation helped me structure it the right way. Yep.
Yeah. I think that's why I love the conversational nature of this show is we have some questions, we talk beforehand, but just letting the conversation wander because just talking it out loud, like we talk it through
Yeah.
and hopefully for the listener listening to us talk it through, we're able to give more form to those feelings and identify them a little bit more consciously. Bring it from the spiritual into the physical.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Be sure to get a hold of them. There are a few people I've had on the show before, and you're one of them that I just feel like you just seem like a really decent guy who wants to just put good out in the world. Encourage people to get to know you better. I've gotten to know you a little bit through the investor platform, through our fund manager meetings through there, and it was a pleasure getting to talk to you a little bit longer. So be sure to reach out after the show because that's how we get business done. You can't really go anonymously sign up for a fund. Like it's a process that we go through. It's not like opening a Robinhood account and linking your bank account and suddenly you're just transferring money. Private markets are a different beast and it really does depend on a relationship with different operators and being able to get your money moved in. And the nice thing about what we do is we're both with investors. So once you learn that
Yep.
platform or that portal, it's easy for you to diversify across different fund managers. So that's one of the reasons I'm doing an investor series of different fund managers coming up here. And I think it'll be really interesting to see the different things that each one are doing, where you learn one portal and then you can invest in a lot of different things. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much. This was really great. Thank you.
Awesome. And I can't wait to hear from you, the listener. Get a hold of me at investwithemma.com and tell me about your next passive income adventure. Till next time.